Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, everyone. All right. My name is Robert Sellers. I'm the Vice Provost for Equity and Inclusion and Chief Diversity Officer. It is my great pleasure to welcome you here this afternoon for our first annual community gathering. Provides us with an opportunity to fellowship and celebrate the progress that we've made with regards to our diversity, equity, and inclusion strategic planning process. So today we're going to really showcase the very best of Michigan. We're going to entertain you. We're going to try to provide you with important information, direction, and end up with some wisdom that has been hard-won from our alums. So without any hesitation or without any further delay, I'd very much like to get our afternoon underway. And with that, I am so pleased to be able to introduce to you the River Raisin Ragtime Review, who will be playing for us today. So join me in welcoming them to our stage.
Most folks nowadays say old-fashioned ways should give place to things that are new. But somehow I hold to things that are old. Perhaps it's an old-fashioned view. I love my old books, the corners and nooks of my old home and my old friends. Old memories too, one love that is true, lasting all through life until it ends. I've got that old-fashioned love in my heart, and there it shall always remain. My love is like the ivy vine, clinging a little closer all the time. Through the years, joy and tears, just the same. I've got that old-fashioned faith in my heart. No changes can tear it apart. If all the dry land changed to sea, it would never make any change in me. I've got that old-fashioned love in my heart. That old-fashioned faith in my heart. No changes can tear it apart. If all the dry land changed to sea, it would never make any change in me. I've got that old-fashioned love in my heart. To cross over into campground, deep river, my own is overjoyed. Over into campground. Oh, don't you want to go to that gospel feast? That promised land. where is peace, oh, deep river Lord. I wanna cross over into campground. Ride on, King Jesus, no man can hinder me. Ride on, King Jesus, ride on, no man can hinder me. I was but young when I began, no man can hinder me, but now my race race is almost done. No man can hinder me. Ride on, King Jesus. No man can hinder me. Ride on, King Jesus. Ride on. No man can hinder me. King Jesus rides a milk-white horse. No man can hinder me. The river of Jordan he did cross. No man can hinder me. Ride on, King Jesus. No man can hinder me. Ride on, King Jesus. Ride on. No man can hinder me. Ride, ride, ride!
So please join me once again in thanking the River Raisin Ragtime Review, and a special thank you to Professor Daniel Washington, who was the vocal performer in today's presentation. So join me. So I believe we are off to a great start, and I want to make sure that we keep the event going. So it is my deep pleasure and honor to introduce our next speaker, who happens to be our leader in this diversity, equity, and inclusion project that we're engaging in. President Mark S. Schlissel has, in his 3.5 years here at the University of Michigan, made monumental changes with regards to who we are and where we've gone. He's shown courageous leadership. He's also shown innovative ideas and a strong commitment to making the University of Michigan a much better place than it was before. So it is my great honor to welcome to the stage our 14th president of the University of Michigan, President Mark S. Schlissel.
Thanks very much, Rob, for that very kind introduction. And how about another round of applause for our spectacular performers? They were just unbelievable. So I'd like to begin by expressing my gratitude to the thousands of members of the University of Michigan family, past and present, who've helped us on our journey to become a better university. Our strategic plan for diversity, equity, and inclusion would not be possible without the intellect, commitment, and proud legacy of student activists, trailblazing faculty, and dedicated and excellent staff. So thank you all. It's also a pleasure to welcome our special guests back to campus. 4 of this year's University of Michigan Bicentennial Alumni Award winners will be sharing their perspectives with us later in the program. Throughout the development of our strategic plan, and now during its implementation, we've sought to hear many voices to help us consider different ideas and to guide our work and its evolution. Our esteemed panelists each bring a tremendous wealth of experience, both as U of M alumni and as leaders in society. Over the past year, we've made good initial progress on many of our goals across the institution in accordance with our strategic plan for diversity, equity, and inclusion. Ideas proposed by members of our community are becoming actions and programs. We've incorporated diversity, equity, and inclusion into our activities, operation, and mission. And we've tailored efforts to address the challenges we face both from inside and outside of our campus. Despite this initial progress, we know we have much further to go. We are not yet near where we want or need to be as we strive for a more diverse, more equitable, and more inclusive academic community. Our students, faculty, and staff study, live, and work in an environment that's not always as welcoming and as inclusive as we would like. These challenges were evident in the finding of our climate surveys that we shared last week. Completion of the faculty, student, and staff climate surveys were themselves a major goal of this plan's first year. The extensive surveys give us data and insights that we've never had before. They were designed to help us establish a baseline for assessment and to help us tailor our work as we seek to live up to our values. Although more than 70% of our community reports being satisfied or very satisfied with the overall campus climate and environment, the quality of the Michigan experience differs among people with differing individual and group identities. In particular, women, minorities, people with disabilities, and people in the LGBTQ+ communities shared that they experience the campus in less positive ways than other members of our community. Rob will join us shortly to offer some highlights and details of the Year 1 report. But I wanted to mention a few of the actions in our plan that directly address areas that were raised in the climate surveys. For instance, Student Life has successfully piloted and is working to expand an innovative program called the Intercultural Development Inventory. The IDI is designed to assess and enhance our student body's intercultural competence, and it helps students navigate their differences in positive ways. This has great potential to improve the campus climate. We know that U of M students come from many distinct backgrounds and geographies. And when they arrive on our campus, students interact with people of different cultures, nations, and points of view. The IDI takes this essential aspect of college life and makes it more thoughtful. Initial results from the pilot indicate significant learning among participants, as well as opportunities to fundamentally transform how students engage with people who are different. An important action we've taken to address the climate in our classrooms is expanding inclusive teaching efforts in our Center for Research on Learning and Teaching. The center's development efforts work with faculty and graduate student instructors to share techniques that can make classrooms more effective and inclusive. Multiple units on our campus have developed staff training programs to create a climate that welcomes differences among people. Some of the courses offered include unconscious bias in everyday life and disability awareness and etiquette. And just this morning on State Street, we broke ground on the new central campus location for our Trotter Multicultural Center. An additional key point I want to emphasize is that funding and progress for DEI efforts are part of the university's annual budget process now. This means that when units submit their budgets to the Provost Office, we consider progress on their DEI efforts when evaluating the proposals. When we introduced our strategic plan last year, we reinforced the idea that it was both a plan and a pledge that would guide our community. I also hope it's helped energize our community. All across the U of M, our students, faculty, and staff have risen up to address the acute needs of our community. Like U of M student Dana Green, who knelt on the diag in peaceful protest against inequality and inspired others to do the same in support. Like the University Musical Society, which next spring will present No Safety Net, a bold collection of socially relevant work and activities designed to foster difficult but necessary conversations in our community. Our National Center for Institutional Diversity, which launched a week-long campaign to combat unscientific racism. As we are in a room full of scholars, we can all appreciate the need to refute the purposeful misuse of flawed research, intentionally misleading interpretations, and outright lies. These actions and many others represent the best of the University of Michigan. They demonstrate our belief that we cannot be excellent without being diverse in the broadest sense of the word. They help us foster an inclusive academic and campus environment where we all treat one another equitably, with dignity, and with respect. Because all members of our community belong here, all deserve an equal opportunity to succeed. These are the values that thousands of members of our community help to identify and then codify into our strategic plan, and thus into our academic and campus programs. In many ways, we are a microcosm of society. We are neither immune from the larger challenges of our world, nor are we without flaws of our own. What sets us apart, however, is that we all chose to work and study at a public university whose purpose is to change society for the better. Through our DE&I plan, we've committed to the honest self-examination we will need to become better. We've embraced new levels of accountability, and we've accepted the challenge and the responsibility as students and educators at a public university and as members of a pluralistic and free society to create a better University of Michigan for all. Thank you all very much, and I'll now turn things back over to Rob Sellers.
I want to thank President Schlissel for those wonderful remarks. Now it has come to me to have the pleasure of presenting a brief snapshot with regards to the overall Year One strategic plan. Again, what I'm presenting today only represents a small smidgen of the great work that is currently going on. And I strongly encourage you and invite you to go online to diversity.umich.edu to get a full accounting of all the work that has been done and all that has been accomplished in this past year. So, in case you just now are joining us this year, so if we have any freshmen or first year folks or folks who are new to the university campus, here's the planning year in a nutshell, or an infographic. Basically, what you need to know is we engaged in a planning process that was designed to be distributed. In other words, instead of a single plan, we actually had initially 49 plans, and now we actually have 50 plans. And the reason for that was we recognized that climate and experience varies on this campus depending on where you're at. And we wanted to make this all of our process. We also wanted to make sure that this planning process was an inclusive one where everyone had an opportunity to put forth ideas with regards to where we're going, ideas with regards to how to get there. The plan is also designed to be flexible, such that periodically we examine where we are, examine what has been working and what hasn't been working, developing new ideas and new directions. So this is a 5-year plan with a 5-year planning horizon. I would dare say that this plan is the most inclusive policy process that this university has engaged in, and I would challenge any other university to have a similar type of process. Now, in terms of the year one action plans, there were 34 central university level action items in the DEI plan. So these are university level plans. At the same point in time, in year one, we had nearly 2,000, that's right, 2,000 action items going on across this entire university addressing diversity, equity, and inclusion playing out at the unit level. Many of those action items were displayed earlier today in our poster sessions, and again, I strongly encourage you to look online to see the nature of those different plans and different action items. With respect to those items, of the 34 university action items, central level action items, all 100 are either in progress or have already been fully implemented in this first year. With respect to the nearly 2,000 unit level initiatives, 85% are either in progress or implemented. So we have been very busy this year, and many of you out there who've been involved in these plans, again, thank you for your efforts. The strategic plan really has 3 large strategic themes. First and foremost, to recruit, retain, and develop a more diverse community. In other words, to address the people, the first P. The second is to promote an inclusive and equitable climate. One can think about that in terms of the process. And last, to support innovative DEI scholarship, teaching, and service, which is all about the product. So our efforts cut across students, faculty, and staff, and is meant to be as holistic and as inclusive as possible. Today, I'm just going to briefly give you an overview on a couple of examples in each of these 3 areas. These are just almost random examples, but they show you what kind of work is going on. So with regards to retention, recruitment, and retaining a more diverse community, I'm going to present some information regarding Wolverine Pathways and the LS&A Collegiate Postdoc to Faculty program. With respect to the Wolverine Pathways is a supplemental education program that's designed to increase the educational opportunities of students starting in 7th grade, following them all the way through grade 12 in select school districts for which we've underperformed in our ability to recruit them. The goal is to provide them with extra special educational experience that will help them not only come to the University of Michigan, but beyond. But make no mistake about it, this program is designed to recruit those students to come to the University of Michigan. We see these as future Wolverines. And just to give you a sense of this, of the kinds of students that are here, let them speak for themselves.
Wolverine Pathways is a great program for both students and parents because of how we try to engage everyone. The students are able to participate in project-based learning modules, so they learn not through traditional methods, but instead through projects in which they get to start something and then see it to the end and then present that project.
And they also are available to be involved in activities that help to enrich them as a person, as a student, as a scholar, and as a future University of Michigan student. We don't want them just Michigan ready, we want them world ready. So no matter where they go, no matter what they do, the skills that they've gotten in Wolverine Pathways will prepare them to be successful wherever they go.
Wolverine Pathways has impacted the way I think about school and education on a very critical and awesome level. They taught me that in order to make my dreams come into reality, that I need to work hard and put in more dedication than ever.
It is amazing to have all the staff behind us, to know that they're there and they're actually listening to our needs and concerns, making sure that we get the best education and support system that we need to actually thrive. It's actually a God-given experience. I couldn't ask for better.
Currently, 631 academically gifted scholars are enrolled in Wolverine Pathways. We are, this year, these scholars come from a variety of different socioeconomic backgrounds. They're outstanding with regards to their academic preparation. Our very first cohort of 92 Wolverine Pathway scholars have already applied to the University of Michigan this fall, and we're looking forward to a large number of them joining us next year. We have started our first year, our first cohort of 7th and 10th grade students from Detroit or in Detroit, and we've been in Southfield and Ypsilanti for the previous 2 years. All students who are admitted to the University of Michigan from Wolverine Pathways and choose to come are guaranteed free tuition for 4 years, as well as any other financial aid that they are eligible for. With respect to a recruitment, retention, development program focused specifically on faculty, the LS&A College Postdoctoral Fellows Program represents a significant commitment. The goal of the Collegiate Fellows Program is to increase the number of faculty in the College of Literature, Science, and Arts with a demonstrated commitment to diversity with respect to their scholarship, their teaching, and/or their service. Already, LS&A has committed to 50 positions over the next 5 years, which represents a significant critical mass. To date, in the first year of the program, which rolled out literally 2 months before the selection process, 767 applications were received and reviewed, 11 offers were made, 7 acceptances occurred in that first year, and in fact, of that 7, the reason why it's 7 and not 9 is 2 others also are attending the University of Michigan, but are doing so on another, in the President's Postdoctoral Fellowship Program. In fact, 3 of the offers resulted in immediate tenure track positions. The other 4 positions are at the postdoctoral level with the possibility of a tenure track offer at the end of the year. This year, as the program has grown, 927 applications have already been received and are being reviewed. There'll be up to 13 positions available this year. And this is our very first class of LS&A Collegiate Postdoctoral Fellows. Next, I'm going to talk about 2 initiatives related to an inclusive and equitable climate. In fact, President Schlissel had mentioned both of these, or at least one of these. The first is the DEI Staff Training Initiative. So with the leadership of the Office of Organizational Learning, as well as the efforts of Michigan Medicine and OHE and the Office of Institutional Equity, The university has made a significant commitment and a significant effort in providing a variety of training opportunities for our staff with regards to diversity, equity, and inclusion. In fact, 10 unique DE&I training programs have been offered in the past year, including such things as a business case for diversity, a special session focused on disability awareness, intercultural awareness, as well as unconscious bias. Over 7,545 staff have served or have been served through 336 programs, with over 90% of the units engaged already. So this is a significant effort that has been underway. It has made significant inroads and significant penetration within our larger staff community. With respect to our students, President Schlissel mentioned the Intercultural Development Inventory Assessment and Pilot Program. This is a program that is being run out of Student Life with the idea of providing students, first assessing where students are with respect to what I like to refer to diversity skills, and then taking that assessment, developing educational experiences as well as co-curricular experiences to help improve students' development with respect to these diversity skills. The reality is that diversity, equity, and inclusion, living in a diverse community, is not something that everyone is born with. In fact, none of us are really born with those. It takes particular skills and abilities as a function of different experiences before we're able to interact effectively, respectfully, and purposefully across difference. And the IDI work that Student Life is doing is specifically designed for this. So they piloted a program with 260 plus students. As is to be expected, 96% of those students believed they had greater DEI skills than what they actually had with respect to the assessment. And as a result, much of the time was spent in the programs trying to resolve those differences and resolve those gaps. Our third area is specifically working on providing support with respect to our DEI scholarship, teaching, and service. This is what we do as an institution. This is core to our mission, and we want to make sure that diversity, equity, and inclusion is an important part of this. And the program that I'm going to refer to is the Inclusive Classroom Teaching Program that CRLT has been taking the lead along with our office to provide each school and college with a tailored set of programs to represent the unique pedagogy related to the different disciplines of these schools and colleges, as well as to not only target incoming faculty and providing them with the kinds of professional development opportunities to develop the skills to make them more effective in a diverse classroom. CRLT has offered a number of other programs as well that are open to all faculty and GSIs. So our goal moving forward is to not only attempt to provide incoming faculty with these kinds of experiences, but to also make sure that we provide support for existing faculty, and to make sure that as we move forward, more and more of our community, whether it's students in the case of the IDI, staff in the case of the staff training, or in this case, faculty, we all have the skills to be able to make this university a more inclusive and equitable place. The DEI plan also addresses, besides those three plans, also addresses issues with regard to support for existing relevant infrastructure, funding for new infrastructure, as well as making it clear that we want to evaluate what we are doing and to be evidence-based in all of the work that we do, and in doing so also hold ourselves accountable to not only implementation but towards success. So this slide just provides you a list of some of the foundational programs who've been doing DEI work long before the DEI strategic planning process, but who have ramped up capacity as a result of these efforts. And each of these programs have received increased support as a function of the DEI effort. In addition to those programs, we've also created new DEI infrastructure. So now 13 out of the 19 schools have added full-time dedicated DEI professionals who are responsible for DEI issues in those schools and colleges, as well as other members of the community who are working on these issues at less than full-time capacity. We have a small grants program, fundraising initiative. We have also focused very hard on making sure that DEI work is recognized, not only with faculty, but also with students and staff. And one of the best ways to do that is to make sure that we have a number of programs where we spotlight on those successes. I also want to take this moment to talk about briefly, or make this announcement. In our Chief Diversity Officer, so now I've been in this position for a little more than a year, it is my pleasure to introduce the fact that we now also have a Deputy Chief Diversity Officer, Dr. Katrina Wade Golden. Where is Katrina? As I am sure that all of the DEI leads and anyone who's been involved in any way with DEI can attest, Katrina is a real resource and is a real gem, and we are deeply honored to have you in this role. It makes me that much more confident in our success in the future, and personally, I want to take this public opportunity to thank you for all that you've done and look forward to all that you will do. Last but not least, a major infrastructure effort that we've underwent is developing and implementing a U of M climate survey. And the U of M climate survey is actually a misnomer. It's not a single survey. It's actually 6 different surveys. It's designed to address a number of different issues that are much more ambitious than what we have done collectively or from the center in the past. It's designed to give us both a snapshot of who we are and where we are as a university, to provide us with a benchmark with respect to who we are and where we are as a university as it relates to DEI. It also is designed to provide information to the specific units, to look at unit level experiences. As I mentioned earlier, this is a distributive process, and the nature of the experience looks very different depending on where you are. So we wanted to make sure that we provided that information as well. We worked very hard to make sure that this survey was as scientifically sound as possible, using state-of-the-art sampling techniques. As a result of that high-quality data, we're able to get information that we've never had before. For instance, information on the proportion of Middle Eastern and North African members of our students, faculty, and staff communities, as well as better estimates with respect to religion, disability status, sexual orientation, particularly across our faculty and student communities. Our results, in some ways, are not surprising. First and foremost, The majority of our campus, students, faculty, and staff, report very positive experiences here. And I think that's important to remember, and I'll come back to that point. Secondly, which is probably also not particularly surprising, is that these experiences vary significantly with regards to what individual social identities, which social identities they possess. Members of traditionally marginalized groups report significantly less positive experiences on our campus than traditionally majority groups. We also found that students and faculty and staff report experiencing non-trivial levels of discrimination across a variety of different social identities, with, again, members of traditionally marginalized groups reporting significantly more discriminatory experiences. Taken together, one of the things that gives me hope in looking at how our campus is experienced differently by different social identities, particularly marginalized groups, is if you look at it, the majority of our students, faculty, and staff are having the kinds of experiences that we would want everybody in terms of our students, faculty, and staff to have. So the reality is, where we want to get to, we can achieve that. We know how to achieve that. Now, the issue is, how do we get and make sure that those kinds of opportunities and experiences are distributed across our entire community? I'd be much more disappointed and much more, or much less optimistic if everybody or nobody was experiencing the kind of University of Michigan difference that we all hope to have. We just need to spread it around. All right. Last but not least, I want to talk a little bit with regards to the metrics and assessment. A very important part of who we are and what we're attempting to do in this strategic planning process is the fact that we have identified specific metrics and we are holding ourselves accountable. We're holding ourselves accountable by not only having events like this where we give you a snapshot, but perhaps the most important ways in which we're holding ourselves accountable is by making sure that everything that we do in every step that we make in terms of progress and accomplishments, as well as challenges and perhaps setbacks, we publish so that every member of our community has access to that information. And every member of our community has an opportunity to hold each other accountable for where we are and where we want to go. So basically, I want to end our discussion today with what I have called our Wheel of Destiny. It is our blueprint, it is our representation of where we are, who we are, and where we're attempting to go. If we achieve this in every way possible, there is absolutely no doubt that we will truly live up to our monikers of leaders and best. So I want to thank you all for listening, and again, please do not hesitate to go to the diversity.umich.edu website to not only look at the plan, but also to have a deeper look with regards to the climate surveys and other information that we have. So with that, I'd like to call to the stage Deputy Chief Diversity Officer, Dr. Katrina Wade-Golden, to lead us to our final portion of this afternoon's event.
Good afternoon. So my role today is to introduce our panel. But before I do that, I want to say thank you to those of you in the audience for your warm reception to the news of my promotion as Deputy Chief Diversity Officer. I am deeply humbled and incredibly honored to serve the university in this capacity and to continue my work with many of you in the audience in service to our DE&I strategic plan. So I'm a woman of faith, and in addition to the hard work and dedication that I put in, I believe that God has put many different people in position to be a blessing in my life and to help guide me from one opportunity to the next. And I want to briefly thank several of those people who are here in the audience. So, as a first-generation student, and a student that, even though I had 4.0s all during high school, I was a student that felt like Michigan was unattainable for me. So I applied all around the University of Michigan. And it wasn't until my guidance counselor, Cerise Townsell, said, also an alum, in her very soft voice, she calls me Trina Rena. Trina Rena, there's only one place for you, and that's Michigan. And so she put in motion the opportunity for me to be able to apply, and the rest is history. So I want to acknowledge her today. She's in the audience, Cerise Townsell. She's there in the back. So I come from a space knowing that even though you put in the hard work and you excel, that sometimes it can look like a non-possibility for you. So it's important for us to get that message out. Another person is Tom Finhold, and I don't know if Tom is here, but he's currently the Dean of the School of Information. And Tom is the individual, and I had an opportunity to share this with him many years later, who was the first person, as a first-year student, planted the seed that I had the potential to pursue a PhD. As a first-year student in his course, he took me aside and said, "Had you ever considered this?" And I'm thinking, I'm a first-year student. You're talking about a PhD. How many years is that? And not only just making that proclamation, but giving me opportunities to be a research assistant with him for a couple of years and pointing me in that path. Many others, like Gerald Gurin and Pat Gurin, I consider myself Jerry Gurin's intellectual baby. He's 95 and he couldn't be here today, but I regularly do lunch with him once a month. Trained me and are dear friends and colleagues. Individuals like Lester Mont and John Matlock and my OAMI family, some of which are here, who really poured in me over the years. My current boss, Rob Sellers, who always allows me the latitude to bring my best thinking to our collective work. And our wonderful team in O'Day, and I know many of them are here, Ellen Meter, Dilip Das, Mary Boyce, Terry Rosales, and Tyne Lucas support me continually. My dear friend and sounding board, Damon Williams, who's one of the bicentennial alum, and you'll be hearing from him today. We've supported each other in this work for nearly 20 years. And last but certainly not least, my family, many of whom are here today, my mother Sheila, my aunt Lisa, my sisters Teresa, Sadi, and Demisha, who allow me to boss them around and keep them on track, and their spouses, my nephews, Malcolm and Gary, and my niece. And a special thanks goes to my husband, Roderick Golden Jr., and my children who are here, Roderick III and Kinsley. They really have borne the brunt of my extreme pace of work over the past couple of months as it related to preparing all that we have showcased on the websites today and all of what we're displaying today, and allowing me the space to channel off when I needed to do that. To all of them, I am in much debt, and I love you more than words can express. So, with that, I believe we are really in store for a treat this afternoon. And when I was thinking of people who might moderate today's panel, I could think of no one more capable and committed to these issues than Dr. Marie Ting. And I know she's going to be a great moderator. And Marie and I go way back to the student days in the Office of Academic Multicultural Initiatives. So Dr. Marie Ting earned her bachelor's degree in psychology and master's degree in higher ed from Michigan, and her doctorate in higher education policy and leadership from the University of Maryland, College Park. She currently is the associate director in our National Center for Institutional Diversity, and prior to her current role, she worked in many units, including the Center for Educational Outreach and the Office of OAMI, which is where we met. She has also served as the University Director of Student Affairs and Special Programs at the City University of New York, the Cooney System Office, and has held positions in both academic and student affairs at the University of Maryland, College Park. So join me in welcoming Marie to the stage as the moderator, and she'll get our panelists set up for what will be a great event in terms of the panel. Thank you.
So thank you, Katrina, and congratulations. I'm really excited to be here today. So as the University of Michigan embarks on the second year of its campus-wide strategic diversity planning process, we believe that it is important to not only hear from our current faculty, staff, and students, but our alum as well. Today, we want to listen to the stories and experiences of a distinguished group of alum who will share thoughts, reflections, and lessons learned about diversity, equity, and inclusion while they were students here at the university. The panelists today were all recently awarded the Distinguished Bicentennial Alumni Award, which were awarded to alum who, among other things, are strong leaders and representatives of the mission and values of the University of Michigan, and individuals whose achievements carry on Michigan's traditions of intellectual creativity and academic endeavor, of civic engagement, and of national and international service. The full bios of this distinguished group is included in your programs, but I'd like to briefly introduce each of our panelists as they take the stage. So Rebecca Alexander is a psychotherapist, author, extreme athlete, and disability advocate. So when asked why she decided to write her memoir entitled Not Fade Away, a memoir of senses lost and found, she replied, "Losing your vision and hearing is not an ordinary thing, but I think there are a lot of people who can relate to it. Reading about other people's experiences have been extremely helpful in the process of coming to terms with my own issues. I'm a big fan of sharing life stories and experiences." So we are really excited to have Rebecca here with us today and to learn more about her inspiring life story and experiences. So welcome. Rebecca, will you join us? So our second panelist is Tanya Allen, who is the President and Chief Executive Officer of the Skillman Foundation, which helps Detroit children prepare for college, career, and life. So in preparing for this discussion, I read and listened to a number of interviews with Tanya, and the message that comes out loud and clear is her commitment to the children of Detroit. I think this quote in a Detroit News piece really illustrates this when she said, quote, "I don't want praise for this work, I want results. I want us to be the envy of the nation. I want our children to be sought after by everyone because of their intellect and character. I believe that this is so doable for Detroit. I just need others to believe it with me." So welcome, Tanya. Our third panelist, Carla Canales, is a singer, entrepreneur, and arts advocate. I've recently been learning more about the amazing work of the Canales Project, and in a TED Talk, when describing why she pursued this work, she shared that, quote, "By connecting what we all have in common, it's much easier for us to have a dialogue about our differences with greater empathy. Thus, the Canales Project is committed to using the power of the arts to touch hearts, examine belief systems, and find those common bonds that link all of us and help us overcome our differences. Carla? And finally, Damon. So Damon really has an unfair advantage today because I actually knew Damon when he was a PhD student and I was a master's student. He was reminding me, I think we were like cubicle buddies when we were in OAMI. So we're all OAMI babies at some point. So a few years later, after Damon graduated and I left at Michigan, we connected for a short period when I think you invited me to do a review of the UConn Multicultural Center. And then when you went to Wisconsin, I came back to the Midwest, and then you've been back and forth on campus a few times. So this is the first time I've seen Damon since he's been in Atlanta. So during our time as students, I knew Damon was going to make his mark, and indeed he has. And I want to especially note that his book, The Chief Diversity Officer, co-written by Katrina, has been very influential for those of us interested in studying CDO. So Damon, will you join us? So we're going to start today. So this discussion will be guided by some framing questions, but I told the panel that I really hope that this will be interactive and they'll feel free to ask questions of each other and maybe even try to pretend that the audience isn't here. We will also plan to have a brief Q&A after the discussion. So Tanya, Carla, Damon, and Rebecca, we're so glad you're here today and look forward to hearing your stories and reflections of community, struggle, empowerment, resistance, survival, and success. So as a warm-up question, I just wonder, just let your thoughts wander a moment. And what are 3 words or phrases that you would use to describe your experience at the University of Michigan?
I'm going first. Okay. Can everybody hear me okay? By no response, that's a yes. Okay. So, wow, it's hard to sum it up in just 3 words. My experience was that I felt incredibly supported. And I just want to make sure, in case it's not able to sort of be addressed at some point later in this discussion, that Joni Smith, who was the director of Deaf and Hard of Hearing Services here while I was a student, she's sitting right in the front row and she'll wave her hand. She is one of the most incredible, inspirational people I've ever met. She is the reason behind so much of where I am today. And had it not been for her and her support and dynamic personality, I don't quite know what my experience would be like at the University of Michigan. So I'm so happy to be able to introduce her to all of you today. Okay, so supported, diverse. I was an American Culture Ethnic Studies major, so maybe it's easier for me to say that. And I don't know, I worked hard and I played hard. So, yeah.
So I would say I would agree with you. Diversity was really important part of my experience, mostly because I grew up in Detroit and came from a pretty poor family. And so my understanding and the scope of the world was very small. So when I came to the university, it expanded and it became even more complex. And so I think that was an important part of my experience. I think the second thing that I would say is curiosity. I think at the university I really had an opportunity to obviously learn, but you know, as students, the way that our kind of K-12 education experience is that they ask questions and you should know the answer. That's how we're trained as students. But when you come to academia, you get to ask questions that you don't know the answer to, and it's the possibility of unlocking discovery is a pretty amazing experience. So I would add that. And then the last thing I would contribute, I think, to this question is leadership. you know, I got into a lot of good trouble on the University of Michigan's campus. I'm surprised they invited me back. Mark must not have seen my bio here at the university. I hope they burned those bios.
Well, 3 words came to my mind fairly quickly. The first was cold. Even though I grew up in Ypsilanti, across Carpenter, it was cold here when I was a student. It still is. But to contrast with that, my second word would be warm. Because I have always felt that the University of Michigan community oozes this warmth. Whether it's a friendliness of someone passing you on the street and saying hello, or holding the door open, wishing you a good day, those small gestures which really make a difference, or the warmth of the faculty, my colleagues, my fellow students. And the third word would be along those lines, mentorship. I met the 2 great mentor figures for my life and my career here at the University of Michigan, one of whom unfortunately has passed away, Shirley Barrett, who was phenomenal opera singer on faculty here, and major international career. And the other is Ken Fisher, who just recently stepped down as president of the University Musical Society. And you know, to add back to that second word, Ken had a motto, everybody in, nobody out. Mm. So it really oozed that sense of warmth and compassion.
3 words. The first thing I would say is that Michigan provided the vision for what I wanted to do with my life and my career. That vision of being a leader who actually engaged in the issues that mattered and did it in a substantive way, but also someone who lived a life of the mind and wanted to make scholarly contributions that would extend much further than what I could do as a leader on a day-to-day basis, no matter how high-ranking your role. The second word I would say is the center. Because the University of Michigan, during the time in which I was here, between 1996 through to 2002, was the center of the universe for issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion in this country, because we were dealing with the lawsuits. And for someone who was interested in those issues, there was no finer platform to be educated and developed in, to be fired in, to be prepared to be a leader in the 21st century in, than the University of Michigan context. And then the third word I would say is love. Because I was enveloped in a tremendous amount of love. And Katrina Wade Golden mentioned his name, and I want to evoke his name again as Professor Emeritus, Senior Research Scientist Emeritus, all things great academically emeritus, Professor Gerald Guerin. He was absolutely an incredibly loving soul to me, and found me in a time where I was doubting academically whether I was strong enough, whether I was good enough, whether I was resilient enough, and his nurturing hands on me as a scholar were only matched by John Matlock's hands of giving me the opportunity to lead at a very high and prominent level. And so doing those things in the same office where my dissertation data was and where I was leading set the framework for me as a scholar and a leader that has stayed with me, whether I've been leading at an institution or leading at a national level. I always do the research, and I'm always doing the practice. And that came from that experience, and that flowed out of love.
So this next question is asking you to think about your time at Michigan, but also your work right now. So how did or do your social identities frame your experiences at Michigan and shape who you are today?
So I'll happily jump in so we can get it started. I would say mine is, as an African-American woman, I think what I learned at the University of Michigan that has really influenced the way I think about my own identity is this notion of invisibility and hypervisibility. So in most cases, if you're doing the average things, you're invisible. But if you do things that are not expected of you, there is hypervisibility. And that hypervisibility, in some cases, can be very positive, but it also could be very negative. And I just recall times when I would think, why did I get pulled away? Or why did I get called out? Sometimes in good or positive ways, but in many cases, negative experiences. And I think that that is part of the kind of narrative that many people who live in underrepresented groups or conditions will experience. And particularly, I think that this is very true for African American males and Latino males who are underrepresented in general. So when they do something that is not expected or frowned upon, there's a hypervisibility, and as a result, there's a hyper response to that. And I think naming that, like understanding that when I was at the University of Michigan, understanding because I experienced it in many ways, but also seeing how it played out with lots of people that I participated with, it really drives the work that I do today. That first of all, I want everybody to have visibility. But it is clear to me that we cannot, we have to call out hypervisibility, especially when that hypervisibility creates inequities in the way that we treat people.
So I'll jump in here. I think one of the most important lessons that I learned while I was here was the importance of advocacy, not just for others, but for ourselves. And, you know, again, I learned that first and foremost from Joni. But in general, I think that, you know, for me, my vision and my hearing loss has progressed significantly since I graduated, you know, in 2001. But even while I was here, my time here was really, I was diagnosed here with Usher syndrome at the medical campus. And so coming to terms with a condition like this, particularly for people with disabilities, but people who are in marginalized positions, we have a tremendous feeling of shame, or that we are not worthy, or that what we're asking for, what we need, what we want is even unreasonable. And oftentimes it's because the people who we ask for it make us feel that way. And so over time, what I've learned, particularly as a disability rights advocate, is that I'm not asking for something that's a privilege, I'm asking for something that is my right. And that, I think, is crucial for all of us, for people of color, for people with disabilities. We are, you know, historically, you know, we have the least amount of paid. People with disabilities in general have very little to no voice, simply because there's such a degree of difference between, for instance, people who are deaf and people who are hearing. I even sometimes feel badly being the person who's somewhat of a spokesperson for people who are deaf, because I'm hearing impaired. Yes, I learned sign language here, but I still can't really, you know, speak for those people. They've had a very sort of different experience. Right. Anyway, so advocacy for sure, and also understanding that these are our rights, not our privileges.
I have a comment. I struggled with this issue in a sort of unique way. Even though I grew up in Ipsy, I grew up in what I think of as a state of cultural confusion. My mother's Mexican, my father's Bulgarian, and they actually taught me their languages first. They didn't speak a common language, and I learned English in school and helped them learn English. So I had these two very different cultures to learn about, my background, my heritage, and a new one, Americana, to assimilate to very quickly. And having had to navigate that from a young age, I was very aware of words, and I was aware of the things that we cannot put into words easily, such as intention and, of course, emotion. And I think it's this that led me toward a career in music. It was really very clear to me when I found singing. It was a marriage of my two passions, language and music. But I bring this up because I remember being in middle school, and the first time I had to, on a census survey of some sort, check a box. And of course, there was no box. I still haven't found one that is Mexican-Bulgarian. And I struggled because I said, well, if I check the Latino-Hispanic box, I'm really denying half of my identity. And there was no other box at that point. And I actually made a little box in the 7th grade and put human. And I got called into the principal's office for it. But this is really what sparked my desire to become an advocate and to start an organization, because I wanted to address the feeling of examining your identity and having to check a box. And for many of us, it's not so simple. And you know, since middle school, I normally check the other box. But intrinsically, that makes me feel like an alien, like an outlier. And I'm very interested in that all box. I'm interested in taking the conversation from the other and shifting it toward what do we all have in common.
Everybody knows what they do. Some know how they go about doing it, but I'm a great believer, as Simon Sinek says, that the leaders who inspire, the leaders who change the world, they have a very clear sense of why they do what they do. Michigan is so intimately connected to my why. When I first arrived here as a very young doctoral student, African-American male, one of the youngest students that had ever been admitted into my department, there had not been an African-American male that had completed the department, I think, in more than 15, approaching 20 years. To be in that context and have to navigate that context, to have to navigate this environment, it was very crystallizing of my why. I sought out the spaces in this environment which would allow for me to find that sense of belonging. I sought out the leaders in this environment who would connect with me first along identity dimensions. When I first came to campus, I kind of looked and I found all the diversity offices that exist on Central Campus, and I systematically went and visited most of them. Not because I knew anybody, but because I wanted to be known, and I was looking for spaces of affirmation. I was looking for spaces where my identity could be nourished, and ultimately, those became relationships that have lasted a lifetime. All inside of all of that was my experience, but it was also the experience of struggling to become an asker of questions and a seeker of answers as a leader, an asker of questions and a seeker of answers as a scholar and as a researcher, someone who wanted to make a contribution. Michigan was so foundational in all of that. And, you know, the best of our experience, it produces that. The other thing that I will say, and it's really from more of a policy and access and opportunity perspective, is I was the very generous beneficiary of a Rackham Merit Fellowship, which provided incredible resources financially that helped me to finance my education. There was no trust. There was no family that was going to be able to help me to come here. And the prospect of taking out 6 figures of loans and rolling the dice on an educational PhD, candidly, was just not a realistic option that I was probably willing to go for. That Rackham Merit Fellowship made the difference. And, you know, we should go over to the Institute for Social Research, and we should run an analysis, an economic impact analysis of the investment that was made in the students that got those fellowships, and track and see what they're doing now, and look at the social, economic, global impact that they're having. And you could probably put a dollar on it, because in this world, economists rule the world, you can put a dollar figure on anything. And I would imagine that ROI is incredibly powerful. And so all those experiences shape my experience, and all those experiences define my why, that I live the way I do, and I do what I do, and I do it without condition, and I do it without apology, nakedly to the world, saying provocatively, this is who I am, this is what I believe, and this is what I'm all about. And that came from Michigan.
You do find, Damon, just with a lift up, I agree with you. I mean, I think one of the most important things about my experience here is you find your voice. And I was thinking, as we were reflecting about the first time I had to actually find my voice, it was unfortunately maybe in 1991, January 15, the MLK rally in what's the
DIAC.
The DIAC. I was like, wherever they have the hash. I didn't go, but I regret it today. But nevertheless, but that was one of the first places that I found my voice. And you just, at the university, it allows you to strengthen that opportunity to find out who you are. And so I just want to echo that. I think your comments are just stellar and right on.
So kind of threading off of that, Tanya, what you just mentioned, and also your comments about leadership and some of the student leadership work you did on campus, which at some point I'd love to hear about. So the University of Michigan is one of the best universities in the world, but similar to other institutions, it's not without challenges and struggles. And this fall, there were a number of bias-related incidents that have impacted communities of color in particular. So based on your experiences on campus and beyond, what advice would you give to current students, faculty, staff, and alumni who are advocating for action and change?
I think the advice I would give is that change is possible. I believe that. I mean, I think I started my work in activism at the university because there was a party on campus. I think it was the South Quad, and the party turned into a fight. And I remember, I wasn't even at the party. This is how silly it is, but in hindsight. But I remember looking at the newspapers and everyone talking about it, and it was described as this melee. And I was like, what is a melee? But it is it's this strong language about how you describe interactions that you don't understand. It was like a little fist fight. And people were taken to jail, and there was this kind of indictment in general over these students, and campus-wide policy changes that were punitive as a response of it, rather than trying to figure out, okay, what happened? Was this an anomaly? Was this actually even our students? Like, that wasn't even part of the equation when they were looking into, they didn't look into it, they just made declarations. And so that really sparked in me this notion of like, that this was unfair. And I remember so my point around all of this is that it was in that moment that I started my kind of activist career. I was far more of an activist than a student during my during my undergraduate time. But the point that I'm trying to make is that we saw large changes happen with very unsophisticated students who believed wholeheartedly and passionately about change. And that there were so many people who helped. Now, there's some folks who will stand up and make public statements about things and who will be public advocates about it. And there are other people who will not. But they do and can have, they do have the capacity and can add that capacity to helping those who will be up front. So I would just say, be clear about the outcome you want, focus hard, get as many allies as you possibly can, make sure that you find the right roles for those allies, and protect those who are standing up for you, because I think a lot of times we leave those people who are willing to be change makers. We love their courage, we love their impact, but when it comes down to the repercussions of those actions, we usually leave them. You know, it's a lonely place in leadership, and so I would say push, 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 support, 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 and be clear about what you want to create, what change looks like, and demand it and count it.
Anyone else like to weigh in on that?
I'd like to offer something with that. I believe very much in being the change that you want to see in the world. And, you know, leading by example is perhaps the hardest way to go about it, but the most noble in my mind. I wish I could say that I was doing the kind of work that has the impact that my colleagues here on the stage are. My field is different. It's very different. I'm a musician. But I take great pride in that because I actually believe that music has the ability to change the world. I believe that because music can be the conduit to open the imagination. And it's through the imagination that we have the capacity to redefine what the world might be like, to imagine a better world. And I guess a few years ago, I found myself in a situation where I'd been beautifully and so skillfully prepared for my field here at the University of Michigan. But there was a big difference between what I was singing as an opera singer and why I was singing. And this idea of music and even a song having the power to change the world. But it kind of brings me back to the skills I learned at Michigan that one might call soft skills, or different kinds of skills, analytic skills, in that I always took with me this idea of asking questions and of being the change I wanted to see. So after analyzing that and really rethinking, how can I, as a singer, serve? What could be the role of art in society? How can we do better? A lot of the self-examination that was even discussed before we came up on the panel, that's what's led me to finding my voice way after my studies, actually, here at the university. And it just goes back to that advice which I received here. Be the change you want to see.
Can I offer something very quickly? In the last 4 weeks, I've had a chance to touch about 1,300 institutions and about 5,000 leaders around issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion through various different platforms. And one of the things that I've been saying consistently is to go where we need to go in this work, Michigan, Clemson, Dayton, UC San Diego, Cleveland State University, Oneonta, any of the various institutions that I've had a chance to touch recently, we have to really poke the box and ask the question how we're going to innovate. And there's a wonderful framework of innovation that's offered by some Harvard University Business School professors that I've played with and extended just a little bit, and it really echoes the comments you made in some substantive ways and brings it together very clearly. Number one, we need everybody to be questioning reality. Why are we not moving this thing faster? Why can't we seem to not poke the box and get different types of outcomes? Why does it seem as if it's doing this consistently over and over again? So how do we ask questions to interrupt the usual? The second thing is, where do we find solutions that we can reapply in this context that could offer some new possibilities? So where are some solutions that are working in other places that we could reapply here? The third thing is innovation is not a singular sport. It's a sport of collaboration. And so one of the things I loved about the DEI plans that I was seeing is the potential to be bringing together partners to collaborate on possibilities, because that's where innovation happens, when individuals come together. And the fourth and the fifth thing, less talking and more doing. Because innovators have a bias towards action, and they experiment, and they build, and they do. Everybody up here probably shares that in common. You experiment, and you build, and you do. And then once you figure out if it works, then you go big. And then the last thing that I'll offer, the sixth characteristic, and this was not in Hayden and Christensen's original framework of innovation, but it has to be present if you're talking about issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion. It is as follows. Diversity issues never move, ever, absent courage. And that was the point that I was so powerfully hearing in your comment, the courage to look beyond convention, the courage to peer into the unknown, the courage to have your voice be heard, whether it's simply standing up in a search committee and saying, hey, you know, this doesn't feel right, I think there's some issues going on, or it's the courage of a student to make a statement publicly, or it's the courage of a president to get out in front and say, you know what, this is the direction in which we're going to go. Whether it's at the micro moment or the macro moment of leadership, this work only finds itself into a place of possibility in the light of courage.
Last thing. This all sort of brought to my mind one of the most important pieces for my life, and that is that as much as we're talking about leadership and being the change that you want to see, I think part of that, becoming a leader, well, how does one do that? And one of the most important things for me, particularly being, as I think we all are, very type A, very hyper-motivated, driven people, is the importance of asking for help. And that is something that took me a very long time. Obviously, for me, it sort of makes more sense. Well, she's visually impaired, she's hearing impaired, it makes sense that she will need help. And a little over a year ago, I gave a TED Talk, and they asked me, well, so what do you want the title of your TED Talk to be? And I thought, I don't know, how can I think of something that's going to be memorable? And the name of my TED Talk was sort of an acronym, and it was HELP, Humanity's Essence, Living Proof. And that sort of goes along with what Carla was saying of humanity's essence is to need help, is to ask for help, is to receive help. And when we're able to do that, it means that we're able to be vulnerable. Yeah. And the importance of vulnerability, as we've heard many people speak about, particularly Brene Brown, who wrote Daring Greatly, vulnerability is crucial in our ability to become leaders, I believe.
So I have one more question, and then we're going to open it up to any questions from the audience. So my question is, based on your national and international work related to diversity, equity, and inclusion, and as a proud alum, what do you think the role is of the University of Michigan in advocating for social justice nationally in the context of recent political and social challenges such as Charlottesville, the Flint water crisis, and the rescinding of DACA?
I struggled a little bit with this question. I think we have to bear in mind not just these national challenges, the international challenges, and the discussion that's being had here about essentially shifting demographics and how do we approach that with an inclusive everybody in, nobody out model. What I love about this university, and the reason that I'm so proud to call myself an alum of the university, is because it's had a deep commitment toward leadership, a deep commitment towards asking the questions, towards cultivating courage, support network. And I think in the face of all of the adversity that's ahead of us, particularly for the next generations, particularly for the next 20 years, nationally and internationally, we need leaders. We need people that are going to have that courage and stand up. And I just know that the work that's being done here on a daily basis by everybody involved at the University of Michigan will make a difference on that level.
So I would add, I agree with your position on that. I would say, I think one of our biggest challenges in this country and actually globally right now is that we are going through such seismic shifts in who we are as people, the way that we work, technology, many of the things that we've had the luxury of looking at over the last 100 years. The car was the same thing for the last, well, maybe not exactly 100 years, but close to 100 years. Television had been the same thing that we've seen for a long time. And you think of, you use the telephone and you use the there's just been such significant changes. And I often would say when I was on campus that, the revolution isn't going to be televised. And quite honestly, the revolution actually is being televised. But people aren't explaining what revolutionary actions and behaviors are happening in this country and that are happening across the globe. And as a result of that, people are fighting hard because they see the losses that they are experiencing. They are seeing the losses that their families are experiencing. And yet nobody is helping them to understand what the future looks like. And I think that University of Michigan has a unique role in that as a global institution to help, but we have to move out of being an elite university. Now, I'm a believer in, I like my University of Michigan degree. I like that it is an elite degree, but the institution cannot be elite. And so meaning to me is that you can't just be a place, as the kids would say, are you woke? This isn't just a place of folks who are woke. It has to be a place for people who are awakening and some people who are asleep. And we have to figure out how we create a pathway to help everybody understand what changes are happening and why these issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion are important in our society if we're going to be prosperous as a nation. This is, in my opinion, this is not about whether or not we are going to be inclusive, even though I think that that is an important imperative. This is about whether or not we will be prosperous as a nation and prosperous as a people, and we have a role and I think a direct responsibility in helping the world navigate that, regardless if they're University of Michigan students or alumni.
Rebecca or Damon, anyone want to take that one on before we open it up?
Well, quickly, you know, I think that great universities have a responsibility to be great. And great in the 21st century means that we lead with what I refer to as an ecosystem perspective, meaning that what happens in the broader environment is relevant to what happens on campus, and what happens on campus is relevant to the broader environment. That what we do at the K through the pre-college level in Boys and Girls Clubs, where I served for 4 years, is relevant to what happens in schools, is relevant to what happens in terms of post-secondary institutions, and that what we do here at a university in terms of creating intellectual value, and creating new research productivity in terms of producing graduates drives economy, drives the corporate sector, drives the talent, the human equation, guides everything. And I think that too often we don't have the type of ecosystem perspective that we need. And candidly, with the pace of change that we see right now, it's one of the things that is making it more difficult than ever before to lead at great institutions, right? It is tough to lead at a Michigan. It is tough to lead at a Berkeley. It is tough to lead at a Virginia. It is tough to lead at a Chapel Hill. I mean, you look at the stressors that are there that these leaders are dealing with, and it's because more and more you need to have an ecosystem mentality. I'll make a comment here. This may be viewed provocatively, but I made it in a major forum recently. The types of leadership that we need stewarding our institutions, whether it's at the dean, particularly at the executive levels, the dean level, the provost level, the presidential level, the skill set that is required to navigate this complexity is different. And the traditional trajectory of faculty to department chair to assistant dean, to associate dean, to provost, to president, I candidly don't think that's giving us all the things we need in our toolkit to handle all the complexities that we're needing. And so when you talk about a Flint, when you talk about various different situations and crises in the world, I think ecosystem perspectives is so critically important.
Amen.
So are there questions? There's 2 mics on the floor, so if anyone has a question.
Do no 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 no. Do no 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 no. Do no 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 no.
Okay, well, I got questions all day, so I'll just go with my questions. Okay, so, Tam, am I good to ask? Okay. So, so you're Bicentennial Alumni Award winner. So, as the University of Michigan reflects on its 200-year history, it's important to remember that the institution is situated within particular social and political movements. So for example, when I was a student, that was when we were sued for our use of affirmative action in admissions. And as a student of higher education, it was so inspiring for me to see, and Damon, I think we were around here at the same time, to see university leaders and local and national media outlets so publicly defending our commitments to institutional diversity, and that really shaped my perspectives on the leadership role that the University of Michigan plays nationally. So I wondered if you could reflect on any social political moments that were influential in your development as a student and influence you today.
When I was here, I had kind of an unusual trajectory. I did two years at Michigan, and School of Music we called the Smurfville. You know, we're up on North Campus. We've got a little lake. Everyone says la 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 all the time. No. But we didn't have a lot of broad programs, and I'm very thankful to the school because I actually kind of made my own with their help. So I went to Paris, I did a degree at the conservatory, and I'd just come back, and it was in that first week back that 9/11 happened. And I remember turning on the TV that morning and seeing what was happening, seeing it unfold, and then thinking I got to turn the TV off and get on a bus to North Campus. And as it was, still happening, I was in this room with the 10 other students that had shown up. And we had no idea what to make of it. I think everyone had a feeling that things were different, that this was a real moment, a moment of reflection. And I guess my takeaway from that moment is one that ties into my experience as a performer. I've come to believe very strongly that trust is a currency. It's never to be taken for granted. It's earned. And the reason that I make that connection, I'll come back to, but essentially when I'm performing on a stage, you might think, well, she's going to be up there, she's going to sing, your role as the audience is to listen, try not to think about what you're going to eat for dinner or breakfast or wherever you're going the next day. And my role is to sing at you. But in that paradigm, we actually have the potential for something much greater. What I strive for is, maybe it's just a glimpse or a moment where I can hold up a mirror and ask you as an audience member to reflect on your own life, where I can be an investigator, be a scientist, if you will, of the human condition, and we can go on a journey together. But that takes trust. And it's not because I'm standing on the stage that you're automatically going to come on that journey with me. I have to earn your trust. And in the same way, those lessons that I was learning as a student on the School of Music campus, I think I started to see on a much broader humanitarian level, particularly with the events of 9/11, that you couldn't just take it for granted that your neighbor trusts you. I mean, I remember Ken Fisher, my mentor here, his first call was to the folks in the Dearborn community with this idea, again, of everybody in, nobody out. But trust takes those kinds of gestures. It takes time. It takes consistency. And ultimately, it's perhaps the most valuable currency, because when you've earned that trust, then you can take a journey together. Then you can bridge the difficult questions. Then you can hopefully have the harder conversations.
That's great. That point about 9/11, it's so powerful. I haven't thought about that in a long time. But I experienced that moment here at Michigan as well. And it was the first time in my life that my identity as an American was activated, right? It was something that I always knew I was American, but it wasn't something that had been really activated. Even though I had done some, minor experiences internationally, but it had never been activated in that moment. And I'll never forget driving around and I had gone into a store somewhere, and I was walking into the store, and I just had this weird feeling, and there was a white male, and he was walking into the same store, and we looked at each other, and we were American. We were connected. We were feeling this sense of collective pain. We were feeling this sense of collective unknowing of what was next. And in that moment, I haven't thought about it in a long time, but it was a very powerful moment. But it's the same moment that our students feel on campus when their voice is elevated en masse, when it's crystallized by something that happens in the community. It's a moment where the shared identity becomes crystallized by the environment, and something that is felt, which is both cognitive, but even more than that, it's affective, and you feel it very prominently. That's why I love artists. I come from a long family of artists, some well known, some not known. But I love the way you speak about art. I love the way you speak about your work. It's beautiful, and it is this pathway of connectivity because it has the ability to bring folks to these moments like this because they feel something. And I've read a lot about your voice, but now I'm gonna have to go learn some things about your voice.
Well, I can have to learn about you.
I want to just say the same thing about the art piece, because I think one of the things you talked about was this notion of that your work is an activist. It is in an activist lane, but in actuality, I think it is. I think that art is the most equitable thing that we could do for anyone. I mean, everybody deserves beauty and the ability to have introspection around that. So I just want to say thank you as well. And the last thing I would just add to this question is that I was at the university in undergrad, kind of post apartheid. And so one of my things that I did was that I would host South African students here on my couch. And so what I would just say, two key things that I think are important learnings for me is that, one, it was really clear that we were a global university, and I'm a global citizen. And then to Damon's point, this notion of activating your citizenship, I would say, from my perspective, is actually, I think that most Americans believe that we don't have a culture, that most Americans don't. Like, they have to go overseas before they figure out, like, oh, people do stuff differently. It just isn't an American way. But I would say that that experience, that kind of social and a political environment, was having this responsibility to be a global citizen, and also having responsibility for who I am and who we are as Americans, that we shape who we are and we shape what our actions can be.
Rebecca?
Can I ask Rebecca something?
Yes, I was actually going to ask Rebecca to close us out, so maybe your question could be the closeout, so thank you.
Rebecca, you said
There's a
something.
question back here. There's a question in the audience too, so before you shut down.
Well, I'll hold my question and cede it to the floor.
Well, first of all, I'm Tina Pryor. I'm with the School of Dentistry and a co-lead for DEI here at the university. And so my question has to do with the intellectual conversation around DEI. And if we're talking about change, major change, globally, nationally, locally, and when we think about the opportunities that we have to introduce DEI into the curriculum, what can we do to really cement that and make it happen so that this conversation is really ingrained in our culture, and for the generations that are coming up, that they're embracing that and helping us to deliver the change that we want to see?
Someone want to take that? And I'm just watching our time as well, so.
Well, I'm happy to offer an alternative solution, perhaps. I think that the arts have been an untapped resource in this way. Mm-hmm. When I look at the field of, let's say, cultural entrepreneurship versus social entrepreneurship, to me, social entrepreneurship is about economic systems, right, and economic change. Whereas cultural entrepreneurship I see as having the potential to examine our belief systems, because culture is about belief systems. And therein, by that examination, can we potentially actually execute some change? It's about a three-step process. It's about saying, first of all, listening and saying to another party, would you allow me the opportunity to see how you see this problem? Would you give me that chance to listen? Step A. If you get to step B of saying, now, would you allow me the chance to share with you how I see the problem? And then going to the third step, ultimately saying, may we revisit this problem together now with that knowledge? And those are big steps to take. And that's where I think art can offer some soft power, if you will. It's not a term I love to use, but I think, you know, people talk about music as the universal language. I don't define it that way. I see emotion as our universal. We all feel. We feel love, we cry, we laugh, etc. And that's what we have in common. If we can use the arts as a way to build that trust, to then take that three-step approach. Now that might seem very esoteric, but it's really about bringing artists into the conversation, bringing music into the conversation, bringing culture into the conversation. I guarantee you we have a surplus of underemployed, underutilized artists in the society, and I would say a social deficit of the intrinsic values that artists can bring to the table, such as creativity and imagination, and perhaps compassion, empathy, etc. So if and when you have an opportunity to engage with an artist, to ask them to come into your conversation, maybe ask them to bring their instrument, share their perspective in a musical way, I hope that that might be an alternative solution.
So I was just going to defer my question, since Damon's about to ask my daughter a question, to let him ask her the question, because I'll be in big trouble if I don't.
Let's do it. Go ahead, Damon, close us out.
No, sure. My question was, you raised this point a minute ago around intersectionality, really, when you were talking about your experience in sight and hearing and intersectionality. And I've had the beautiful opportunity to serve on the advisory of Gallaudet University for years, at helping them to stand up their diversity, equity, and inclusion work. And Gallaudet is a university for the deaf and the hard of hearing. And one of the most powerful examples of intersectionality that I had ever seen in my life was seeing someone communicate who could not see and could not hear at all, and seeing them sign in hand. It was powerful. But I believe this issue of intersectionality is one that is going to be a powerful defining moment of the 21st century across all spectrums of identity, intersectionality. And I'd just love to hear you say some more about intersectionality and your experience and how you've brought these things together, because I thought it was very powerful and we didn't lift it up, but I felt like it needed to be lifted up.
Sure. So there's a few things. I mean, you know, one of the things that here we are, and I think we've made tremendous progress in terms of our ability to really communicate and speak out about inequality and, you know, promote diversity, equity, and inclusion. And the interesting thing is, I was speaking to one of my very dear friends. Her name is Haben Gurman. She's deafblind. And she was the first deafblind woman to graduate from Harvard Law School. Really a remarkable woman. We're both from Oakland, California. So we've been fortunate to always live in very diverse environments. But you know, one of the things that we were talking about was that, okay, so we're dealing with disability. You know, we're dealing with LGBTQ+, we're dealing with diversity and people of color. And what about if you're a person of color, you have a disability, you are also first generation? You know, these are things that we don't think about, that even within the discussion of diversity, we are segregated. Yeah. And so, you know, one of the things that I was thinking about, I always try to come from a place of positive thinking. Somebody asked me, actually, Joni asked me last night, would you rather live a life that is meaningful or a life that is happy? And the answer is, well, in my mind, if you lead a meaningful life, that you will be happy.
That's right. Even as you struggle.
Right. So, and you know, I think that that's the difficulty, that we sort of are also born into a world, or particularly a culture, where it's, you know, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That's our first mistake. Because life is not about happiness, as much as I wish I could say that it was. Life is about experience. It's about struggle. I don't think any of us has really, really learned something that has been worthwhile, that has impacted us, that we simply, you know, just did easily. I think that there's been a lot of struggle in everything that we have done to get to where we are today. Now, did we enjoy the experiences? Maybe in hindsight, we can see the benefits of them, but certainly not at the time. But even today, when we were watching the Wolverine Pathways video, the first thing I see, wow, this is awesome. But actually, what I really see is, this video is not closed captioned. That somebody who is hearing impaired, who may also be a person of color, who may also be someone who's from an underprivileged, you know, background, is not going to be able to watch this video because it's not closed captioned. And so these are things that, as much as we're doing tremendous work, these are the things we still have to continue to do and to fight for. How do you explain to someone, you know, when I go somewhere, I say, you know, I'm really sorry I'm hearing impaired. They say, oh, well, just look over here, it explains it. And I'm like, look over where? So do I tell someone that I'm hearing impaired, or do I tell someone I'm visually impaired? Or can I, you know, try to tell them that I'm both? And part of what I use myself as, I try to be an example. I try to go out in the world, and as soon as I feel afraid of how someone is going to treat me, or that someone may not be respectful of my needs, I say to myself, well, the only way you're going to find out is if you try. And not only that, to go back to what Carla said about being the change that you want, particularly in the disability community, there is tremendous shame. When I speak to people who are visually impaired, this cane is the one thing that makes them feel like, if I use this cane, people will never treat me with respect. People will never know how to, you know, respond to me. And I try to use this, even in times when I don't actually need it, just so that there are more of us out in the world that we are seeing using these canes. We are just like everybody else. So intersectionality is such an interesting subject, and there's so much more we have to learn about it. And I appreciate you mentioning that. And you know, the interesting thing too, I will say lastly, is that in terms of Gallaudet University, most of my friends who are deaf, you know, going to Gallaudet is a very social experience.
It's a thing.
Because if you grow up in different parts of the country or the world where people are deaf, the likelihood is you are a major minority.
Yes.
So the people who are deaf and
Yes.
are raised in very sort of diverse or progressive communities, they want to go to the University of Michigan. They don't want to be assigned to Gallaudet University because this is where all the deaf people are.
Yes.
They want to go to the University of Michigan, and they want to talk to the people who are mainstream or interact with them and develop the same leadership skills that people who are fully hearing are able to do.
That's right. And different levels of oppression and hierarchy emerge in that environment between those who are born deaf versus those who are hard of hearing, those who bring other dynamics. And it's a wonderful example of how the human condition, we find ways to order ourselves oftentimes that suppress, even in the space where we're all dealing with something that has common links.
So I really wish we had had more time. People who know me, I always say, there's a book here. So we had to figure out how to turn your stories into a book. But can you join me in thanking our panelists?
This was fabulous. Oh, I love you. Yeah, thank you.
Amazing.
Thank you.
And I want to
Absolutely.
invite back up our Chief Diversity Officer, Dr. Rob Sellers, to close us out for the evening.
So please also join me again in thanking this wonderful panel for just this beautiful, wonderful words of wisdom and direction, and also being living examples of what we all hope to be and what we want to be in terms of a larger community. So thank you very much for your words of wisdom and pearls. It is that time to close us out. Again, I want to thank you all for coming and also encourage you to participate in as many of the other DEI events that are happening at the unit level as possible. Again, we see the Diversity Summit Week as an opportunity for us all to share, to learn, and to reinforce where we're attempting to go. Thank you all, and have a good evening.